Cadbury Creme eggs have been popular for a long time. This is like, I mean, especially in the UK, this is like a really popular egg from Cadbury. I know that when I was a kid in London, one of the first Easters, in fact, the first Easter I remember, we actually had these cream eggs. So I understand that, you know, a lot of people like this stuff. And I mean, I've tried this recently. I don't like this anymore. It's way too sweet. It tastes like shit, to be honest, but some people like it. Question is though, will this stuff actually kill you? I'm going to say no because you'd probably have to eat a lot to kill you, but it might kill you slowly. Let's take a look at the ingredients and find out. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're going to be like, but these are good for you because they don't taste that bad and they've got milk and stuff in them. And I'm like, yeah. Well, the problem here is there's a lot of ingredients on the back of these that will really fuck you up. Let's find out. Now, let's look at the back of this. The first ingredient is sugar. Now, when it comes to chocolate, if the first ingredient is sugar and not cocoa, then the chocolate is shit. That's the end of it. All the cheap chocolates start with sugar. What is the sugar? In most cases, funnily enough, people don't realize this doesn't necessarily actually have refined sugar in it. What these products usually have is manufacturer's sugar. So I'm going to show you a picture. That right there is manufacturer's sugar. So it's called manufacturer's white sugar. Now the difference between this and other sugar, it's actually less processed than refined sugar. The reason for that is because the crystals come in various sizes. As they get raw sugar, which is a brown colored sugar, this is what it looks like. Sugar has a strong molasses flavor to it. So what they have to do is they have to keep taking it through a refining process over and over again until the brown color is gone, until the molasses flavor is gone. Then you're left with some big size crystals. That's manufacturer's sugar. It then gets ground down further and further until you get fine refined sugar. Refined sugar is used in the production of things like cakes and stuff. Situations where the sugar doesn't necessarily melt. When it comes to chocolates, they do melt the sugar down. So they can use less refined sugar for chocolate. So oddly enough, the sugar in these cream eggs is better for you than the sugar in bakery goods. Second ingredient is milk. We still haven't reached cocoa yet, so this is obviously still bad quality chocolate, but milk being the second one could be good, except what are milk solids anyway? It's like various extraction processes of milk. I'm not going to say it's bad for you, but there's always bad parts in processed food and the manufacturing of such. But this is probably the best ingredient on here, so I'm not even going to say it's bad for you. It's not like 100% good, but it's definitely not 100% bad. So we're on to the next ingredient, that's cocoa butter. We finally reached the cocoa parts. We'll do cocoa butter and cocoa mass at the same time. So cocoa, of course, this has cacao, you know, whatever. That's like the more raw form of it. Cacao mass, they take the beans and essentially grind them to a paste. That's cacao mass, right? The butter is taking the beans, squeezing it to get the oil out, letting the oil solidify, and now you've got cocoa butter. So cocoa butter is essentially a seed oil, but if I understand it correctly, it is a saturated fat seed oil. Let me just consult my expert to the side here. That's a saturated fat seed oil, right? In the same category as coconuts and olives, is that correct? Palm, okay, yeah. What about olives? It's, okay, my mistake. Yeah, I just had to consult my expert, Freddie, on the side there. He's got all the facts when it comes to all the different types of oils. So he's telling me that coconut oil, palm oil, and cacao oil, which is cacao butter, are all these saturated fat vegetable oils. They're all the better ones. Something like olive oil is omega-9, not as brutal as the 6s you get in canolas, and rapeseed oil, not a good name. Those are the ones that are the worst ones. But yeah, these saturated fat ones are good. Freddie's always got the answers when it comes to the oils. So he tells me that the cacao butter and the cacao mass aren't too bad on this. So let's move to the next one. And before you understand, if you don't understand ingredient lists, it's always biggest to smallest, always. That's why I said sugar being the first ingredient means it's the majority. In fact, if I scroll down here and see the sugar setting, the sugar is 67.5 grams out of 100 grams. 67.5% of this is sugar. So why are you telling me that's good? Okay, well, yeah, sugar is addictive, which he is mentioning. If you want to see the expert on the video, make sure you leave that in the comments. He'll give you some good information. He doesn't want to be on camera though, probably because, I don't know. But yeah, so biggest to smallest, and there's a lot of sugar, 67.5% sugar. So we're on to the next one, and I talked about the sugar, we're on to invert sugar. So invert sugar, I mean, you can make it yourself if you mix white sugar in water and then cook it down so the sugar melts. That's invert sugar. The version in this sort of stuff is usually just fructose and glucose mixed together. So again, the extraction processes might not be the best, but it is still sugar. Sugar isn't bad for you. It's not good for you in some ways with the whole insulin spike and that sort of stuff, but I don't think it's as bad for you as some of the other stuff in here. Of course, sugar is something that can be eaten in moderation because that's how it works. Poison can't be eaten in moderation, but sugar isn't really poison, it can be. On to the next one, glucose syrup. That's just the same as invert sugar, but more glucose or only glucose. It's just a syrup version of glucose, really strong sugar. They use those because they're liquid sugars, and obviously that's to make the cream, the cream filling and stuff. Now we've reached the bottom end. So the bottom end, we've got small amounts of this stuff, but this is the stuff that is bad. Now the chemical elements, that's what you're here for. Emulsifier 476, that can be derived from things such as seed oils, or it can also be derived from pork fat. So, if you don't eat pig, then it's not going to be good, but they usually do say in brackets, as this one does, it's made from soy. So the emulsifier in this one is made from soybean oil. Now, soybean oil or seed oils is obviously everything in the seed oil category. That is going to be a whole other video in itself if that's something you want to see, or there's heaps of information out there. We don't need to go too far into those because at this point, if you don't know that seed oils are bad for you, then, I don't even know what you know anymore. But that's just basic information at this point. So we're going to go past that, but you should know that one's bad for you. We're talking about some severe DNA damaging effects, namely things like autoimmune disease and all sorts of other stuff. But there's a lot of people out there with information on that. So I'm going to go in depth on a few of the further ones down here. So let's go to the next one. Humectant 422 is the next one on the list. That's literally just a boiled down version of glycerin. Glycerin can be derived from vegetables, or it can be derived again from pig fat. Pigs have a lot of useful parts of them apparently, but glycerin in most cases is derived from vegetables. That's just fats from vegetables basically. Again, a chemical process to get those out. When you try to go down the route of finding this information out, it's like this chemical is one thing, and then it comes from this chemical, which is made from these chemicals, and it goes further and further and further. So that's something you really need to go in depth into to really find that information out. I'm pretty much telling you the base of what these things are, and you can ask me if you want me to go more in depth of these things, or you can search it for yourself. But let's move to the next one. Preservative 202 is the next one on here. Now, preservative 202 is also known as potassium sorbate. So potassium sorbate is produced by essentially not combining, but it says, neutralizing sorbic acid with potassium hydroxide. So sorbic acid is essentially extracts from fruits, basically. So a chemical extract from something like an apple, for example, and then you get the acid, sorbic acid. But they need to mix it with stuff to make it usable. And the thing they mix it with is potassium hydroxide. So potassium hydroxide is just a strong acid, essentially, that's used in lots of areas. So it's used in industrial applications, but regarding food or products that are used by you, it's used in soft soaps, essentially, soft soaps, liquid soaps. But the thing about it is, in major forms of it, it's like insanely corrosive, essentially, because it is just a straight acid. So if you're going to be using something like that in food, I mean, it's in such a small quantity, you could say it's basically worthless, but the more you eat, the more it adds up. So that gets mixed with acid from essentially apples, and then that's when you end up with the overall preservative 202. So, I mean, preservatives is what they use to keep it long shelf life. What that does to your body could be something else entirely. The only purpose of having it is to make sure the food lasts a long time on the shelf. It's not for your health, obviously. Food acid 260 is the next one on the list. So food acid 260 is basically just a fermentation of sugar, essentially. So, I mean, the best version of it would be sugar fermented with vinegar, but there's a whole lot of chemical or synthetic versions of that, and you can be sure it's very likely this has synthetic versions of that. So essentially, just straight chemicals is what food acid 260 is. If it was the natural form, that's a different story. You would only find out the real versions of what all these are by contacting the manufacturer, if they would even tell you, which they won't. So that is pretty much what that is. There isn't like a lot of like very bad negative side effects with this, but basic negative side effects, which actually comes from a lot of these minor ingredients, are things like, bloating, all that stuff that goes with that. So vomiting, diarrhea, that sort of good stuff. When it comes to eating stuff like that, again, in large quantities is where you'll really notice it. The interesting part though about food acid 260 is it's one of the things that is a major cause of tooth decay. So you might think it's like sugars and bacteria eating those sugars, which of course is a big part of it, but when it comes to eating certain stuff, food acid 260 is known for causing tooth decay. If something like sugar is like, okay, this will cause tooth decay over a certain amount of time, and food acid 260 is like, this will definitely just cause it, then you can really see how you can accelerate tooth decay by eating processed foods rather than just sugar stuff itself. That's what really pushes it along. Next, we've got flavors. Flavors, I explained this in another video. I'm just trying to remember what channel it's on. Yeah, it's on my second channel. So if you go to the second channel, I might link it in the description. I did a breakdown on a bottled iced coffee you can buy from the shops. And in that one, I did a sort of talk and conversation about what flavors and colors actually are. So this one, obviously, flavors. Briefly, again, it's like this other chemical thing. So chemical extracts from animals, namely pigs, or some vegetables, stuff like that, chemical mix-ins, and they put it together. The interesting part about flavors and colors is the fact that it's called flavors. The way it's been written into food safety standards, that's one where they don't have to tell you anything about what's in it, which is why it always just says flavors. They're not under any obligation to tell you anything about that particular one, because that gets classed as like secret recipe ingredients, so to speak. I don't know why, but that's pretty much what it is. If you see flavors or colors, that could be really bad. It could be okay, but if it was, I've seen some products that actually do have flavors and it says in brackets what those flavors are. Those are the ones that are okay, which means if it doesn't say it, assume it's the worst stuff. Always assume it's the worst stuff when it comes to these things. Last thing on this list is Color 100. Now, Color 100 on the surface level could be quite good because if you look at it, it's derived from turmeric, so shouldn't be a problem. Turmeric is anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, that sort of stuff, good for blood flow. Turmeric is a really good sort of spice to have. This is supposedly extracted from turmeric. However, when you look into it, yes, again, you can have synthetic versions, so there's no way to tell again. But let's just assume for a moment it's the best one, a turmeric extract. So yes, on the surface that's good, but the second it goes to the chemical processes, then things start to break down. Lots of particular studies on this stuff, many different reports. One report found that overconsumption, major overconsumption, of Color 100 caused thyroid inflammation in pigs. So I don't know how that relates to humans realistically, but I mean, to a degree, maybe. Thyroid inflammation can be further inflamed by eating processed sugar, processed carbs, which is what that is. How to bring thyroid inflammation down, higher doses of magnesium. So, obviously you're not going to get that in this stuff. But that's a full breakdown of these eggs. I mean, you're probably still going to eat them. It's Easter, so everyone does this sort of stuff. When it comes to things like this, people always say in moderation, which to a degree is actually true. Almost everything from the most poisonous subject in the world could be eaten in moderation. If you took something that was like, I don't know, say nuclear waste, for example, maybe you could take in like a micro dose and not have an effect. If you have like bananas, for example, if you were to eat like 3,000 bananas, you would get potassium poisoning. So bananas have to be eaten in a dosage as well, but I don't know how you can eat 3,000. So everything has their dosages. The problem is something like meat and milk and fruit and whatever other stuff, that sort of stuff, good stuff that's for you. The consumption you would have to eat to get sick from that stuff is way too much. When it comes to this stuff, the consumption you have to eat to get the poisonous effects is basically nothing. So moderation, when it comes to things like this, these Easter eggs and stuff, really comes down to a few at Easter time, which means once per year. Of course, that's just because it's an Easter egg shape. There are many other shapes to this stuff. The more expensive you buy, the better. I've found Easter eggs, like, take this packet for example, you might buy this like $5. But then elsewhere you could buy $5 on one singular egg, which is made of much higher quality ingredients than all the stuff that's in this packet. So even cost-wise isn't really an excuse, because you can get the same stuff at the same price that's actually much better for you. All this mass-produced branded stuff is all the stuff that's going to be the absolute worst for you. But like I said, moderation is key, as long as you understand that some doses have to be basically nothing. So realistically, it's best not to get addicted to this stuff. Have it very sparingly, and the less you eat it, the less you'll actually want it. If you want this stuff all the time, it's because you're used to having this stuff all the time. If you don't, then you don't. Once you come back to the stuff after not having it for ages, like, I don't eat barely any Cadbury stuff anymore, and cream eggs out of every single egg they make, to me, taste the absolute worst. It's got a very strong burn, an acid and sugar burn in these eggs. So I definitely don't like these ones. Whereas when I very first had it, it wasn't too bad. But now, I don't think these are any good. It's not like I won't be having Easter eggs at Easter. I'm going to be eating, I found some stuff that's super high quality. So we're talking about internationally imported stuff. I didn't buy a lot, just a few, and I spent about $1,000 on chocolate. So, like I said, $5 to buy you a small size, good quality egg, or a big size pack of those. But on the high end of the scale, like, what have I got? I've got like one egg that I paid, I don't know, like $50 for, which is, only has chocolate in it, basically. And then I've got another egg that costs, I don't know what it cost, I think like $200 for a small egg, imported internationally. It's got like super high-end cocoa beans grown in certain nutrient-rich soil. Volcanic soil is usually what this stuff is grown in. If you've had naturally sparkling water, you know what I'm talking about. So the cocoa bean itself has a more fruity flavor to it. It's much higher nutrients. It's like really, really premium stuff. If you can do that, then obviously you should do that. If you can't, there are alternatives to this. And if you really can't, just keep it to an absolute minimum. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. There's not really much to it. It's not that serious. Well, it is actually, but it's not like brutally serious. And for most of you, it won't really matter what you eat. How much difference in your life do you think it's going to make, really? It really depends what you want out of things. If you want like a healthy, active lifestyle, then obviously you understand. But, if you don't, just moderate it, keep it to Easter, and watch out for the rest of the year.